Hey now, Rob here, Rob School of Music, and I am so excited because today we're rocking with Holden Fincher and we're going to talk music.
Love it. What's up, Rob? Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely, brother. You know, this is such a cool serendipitous thing. Just for quick background, anyone who's watching this, Marvelous 3 was one of my favorite bands growing up. I never got a chance to see them live just because I stumbled upon it a little bit too late. And when I saw the reunion stuff was happening, I was like, I don't know. And then there was the Chicago show, and my best friend lives in Chicago. So I was like, this is a good reason to go out there. Went to the show, melted my face off, and I'm like, wait a second, there's four guys up there. What's going on? They understand. And then, I found out what was going on, and we'll get into that. But I was like, wow, this is really cool. Next day, we go to Chicago Music Exchange. I'm like, wait a second, that looks a lot like that same guy. And you were so friendly and gracious, and just thanks for being so cool in that moment. I really appreciated it.
Oh, I appreciate you. You were so kind as well. It made the day better. It was awesome. And also it was so cool just being able to that we're doing this now, a couple months later. But yeah, absolutely.
Awesome, dude. Yeah. So this channel is it's music education and stuff. And my goal is just to show everyone that music can be part of your life. And even if your goal is, when I was growing up, I wanted to be Metallica. And then
Mhm.
I have maintained a career in music for the past nearly 15 years, and I never became Metallica. And I think it's important for people to know that there's places for everyone doing everything from educators to sidemen to studio work to producers. And, I just want to show everyone that music is for everyone. So
Yeah.
I think a cool jumping off point was, what was your experience going into music? And I'm kind of leading that question. When did you realize Dad's a rock star?
Well, it's funny because I think when I was a kid, it was more so about a couple of things. Like with both my parents, they were artists growing up until I was about 5 or 6. And then we were kind of talking a little bit before this of just the realities of living as a musician, grassroots DIY. If everything's based on cred, that cred is not the same thing as money. And so when you have a 5 or 6 year old, you need to figure out how to make sure that everything's kosher. And so when I was a kid, it was kind of this funny transition of like 5 or 6 to a kind of a different way of living, and a kind of around different people. Moved up to the suburbs and did like it was a different environment that I was kind of conscious of, and so there was always a bit of a separation to like two parts of life in a way. And around the time I was 7 or 8, I figured that it would be a good idea to kind of concentrate on some of the stuff I was trying to make. I was always kind of making stuff up in my room, and whether it would just be writing or drawing or curating kind of worlds or whatever that was, as kids do. And I knew that music was a conduit of that, and there was instruments around. And so I didn't have to ask my parents for lessons. I didn't have to ask for anything. It was just kind of already right there. And kind of similar to you kind of mentioned that you started at 6, right? And then dropped it, or
Yeah,
6.
five quit by was 6. Yeah.
5 quit by 6, which is, I don't blame you at all. And it was kind of a similar thing of like a touch and go towards those things. And then about the time I was 8, I, for whatever reason, got bit by the bug, and it never kind of let up. And I'm a big nerd, so everything about my obsessions of just mythology and all of these other things that I was absorbed in kind of went right into just let me learn everything that I want to learn. And what was great is at the time, and I feel like there should be a study about this if there hasn't, but I grew up in the generation of kids who School of Rock and Guitar Hero came out right when I was learning guitar.
Yes.
And I feel like that was a seminal teacher, a great helper of the education, of the full let out of getting kind of privy to, I think, the classic culture of musicians and guitars. But in actuality, my parents never really pressed on being a musician. And in fact, we had some really honest conversations when I was about middle school, because they saw how into it I was. And they were like, listen, if you don't really have to do this for yourself, sometimes it's better to kind of keep the magic of this kind of thing and make it something that is, and they gave me the options of just like, it can be something that you just sit at the end of your day and it's what you absorb yourself into. It can be all of these things, but if you need to do it and you want to do it, we back that fully. But it was their routes in the world were much like kind of what you and I are discussing of it's not always Metallica. It is it is like, sleeping on floors and trying to figure out how to re-steam your strings in the pot that you just cooked the ramen in, that kind of a deal. But I loved that and I wanted that. So I guess I apologize if that was kind of long-winded or kind of all over the place.
Brother, that was a perfect answer, because you know what I find is as I get into these conversations with people in most of these situations, or I'm basically forging a friendship with a stranger in this moment. So please tell me everything you want, because I'm going to learn everything I can and pick parts. And if you see me scribbling, I'm taking notes on stuff you're saying. The sleeping on floors, I talk to many students about it. They're like, what's it like being on tour? I'm like, well, the last big tour I did was in 2012, and it was with a metal band called Diecast. And I slept on the floor every night, and there was no heat in every place we wound up sleeping. And we're in the Northeast in February. Yeah. So it was like New Hampshire and Maine and Rhode Island, and freezing. And they're like, that doesn't sound very fun. I'm like, no, that was not fun.
It's part of it's like one of those things. I guess it's the kind of splits of, I guess that's the difference of people, and kind of how you prefaced it at the beginning. There's a spot for everyone. In the world, and especially now within music, more and more it's just like, it's not just these sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself, but absolutely for me that was I loved that. I love that kind of pirate ship thing of
absolutely
unconventionality, because I felt like I don't know, and I don't mean to speak with like too much pretension, but I think as a kid the peripheral of everything felt more cool and comfortable and exploratory rather than looking at something direct. So I think a life that was kind of in that capacity always felt a bit more natural. But I never diss anyone when they're like, I don't want to do that. I'm like, absolutely not. That's a very much it's a choice. It's kind of back to the conversations my parents, who are so amazing and supportive, but they were very real with me, had, where there's like, this isn't a thing that everyone should do or can do, or and if you don't need to do it, it's not that thing. But not everybody has to take that route. And I was having a funny conversation with someone a few days ago, and not to jump too far, but it's just like, I think people need to realize that their favorite records, their favorite tours, their favorite bands are made up of purists, artists, sellouts, businessmen, hanger-ons, and posers, all combined to create those things, and also the people who just want to learn the technical aspects or be the studio bugs, or the people who are just road dogs. Like there's a spot for everyone, and it all creates the things that we love and that reflect us and our culture. It's not just the real.
Yeah, no, dude, you're spot on. And I think it's important. It's something that I try and fixate on in our lessons here at the school here in Suffern, like the in-person stuff, the work we do. My guitar teacher growing up was a bass player in a Pink Floyd, a nationally touring Pink Floyd tribute band. He also owned a recording studio. So he would, I would hear these stories of what it was. And for me, like, I was enamored with it. I wanted to be on the pirate ship. But now me on that side, working with other younger musicians or people who are potentially pursuing this life, we right off the bat, there's a questionnaire like, where do you see yourself in 10 years musically? And it's okay to not know the answer, and it's okay for that answer to change. But if that answer is a strong in my bedroom playing for myself, that's okay. Like it has to be here first, and then what you do with it, that's completely up to you.
Yeah.
So at what point for you, segue into, okay, this is something I'm going to pursue, and what was that pursuit like, ramping up to ultimately doing those Marvelous 3 gigs? Because you had said something to me when I met you. You're like, this is I forget the phrasing. It was like, this is a moment in time. This isn't like the real thing. This is just this thing, which is such a beautiful way to like be in the moment. That stuck with me incredibly. But what led up to that? And then, all that.
Yeah. Well, for me, it's like, I obviously want to speak with like just a lot of respect towards their own story and their own journey. Cause I don't want to be their biographer, but there's so much like chosen family and over 30 years of, like 25 years of touring before that breakup of that band. And then like another 20 years of life lived as just friends and family. And so you kind of met me at a strange time in my life. But yeah, you did. It was one of those things where it was like, this isn't every day. And so this is family together really presently, which I think when you're lucky enough to be aware of those things, it's just like, just try to take it in as much as possible.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think leading up to that, by the time I was 8, the bug hit pretty hard, and I was a bassist first. And it very happily, it's still my favorite instrument. But and I kind of very consciously was not super I respected guitar culture, but I wasn't super. There was something about guitar players that it didn't quite get me yet. I think for me, it was about, I love that the bass, again, the whole point was to create things. And so I love that the bass was something you kind of had to lean into for a lot of people to pay attention to,
Yeah.
and was this middle flux of both rhythm and polyrhythm, or melody or counter melody, depending on who you listen to, whether it's like John Paul Jones or Jameson, or you could go all the way to like a Kim Deal or a Jared Followell as like a current bassist. And I was obsessed with all of those people when I was in elementary school, and I thought they were really cool. And especially if you were like the front man or the lyricist, or figured out a way to kind of tie that. But then I started realizing that a lot of those bass players that were this primary songwriters also had to know a few chords to be able to. I had like spent about a year and a half trying to write songs just on bass, and I had kind of reached a limit. And around the same time, Elephant by the White Stripes had come out, and Get Behind Me, Satan, and those two records by them struck me. It was all raw, and it was all a rhythm, and it really made a lot of sense to me. And that, along with like, and I think and then like a couple years later, Paramore's Riot, and it was like both of those things of just like kind of went into my brain of being like, okay, now the guitar feels like something that I've all right, I know like what I could use that for if I started learning it to write songs. And so I was already kind of in like kid bands playing bass and trying to do that. But around the time I was about 10 or 11, very similar to your story, which made me really smile really big. I met my best friends to this day, and we started a band. And when we were about 10 or 11 years old, and started playing bars in local clubs around the time we were 12, and just in different iterations and different genres. And we were just in love with the whole thing. We wanted to eat it all up and figure out everything about it, and figure out it all out with each other. And it's to this day been the most intimate, loving relationship I think I've ever shared, besides the one that I have with my direct mother and my father, and those kind of capacities. But and it started about a 10-year journey of us just every day together constantly. And if we weren't together, we were practicing, and our heroes were like, we like looked at Prince as like our, and like in as our kind of levels of where we needed to be practicing. So they were just like hours and hours, and we loved it. It wasn't work, and it was so much fun. And we were together for a really long time, and created something I think that was super intimate in our own. And that ended, funny enough, that April of last year, where we made our last record. My drummer Grayson, who is one of my best friends and an incredible videographer, had his first kid, and he got married, and he's moving to Montana, and it was a celebration. But we had an album that I felt was a good indication of our time together as friends. And so the three of us, Trent, Grayson, and I, mixed and produced and kind of created everything and set it out as like our I love yous to each other. And then that ended, and then I went on the road with some other artists just around Europe and US, just as a guitar player and helping with session stuff, just trying to kind of gain a different sense of normal. And then at the exact same time, my father, who was in a band in the 90s, Marvelous Three, he and Butch and Slug, the other two members, kind of had this conversation of just like, hey, I love you guys. And Butch was like, I have songs that sound like ours. Do we want to like have fun and do the same thing? Again, that earnest, like familial thing. And around the end of their time as a band in the 90s, as an indie band in the 90s, they had a fourth guitar player named JJ, who incredible dude, incredible guitar player and bassist, and phenomenal. And so it was one of those things where it's like, well, we need a fourth person. And at the time, I was touring and working, and Butch and I had some conversations just about it, and I was like, obviously, I would absolutely love to help out with this lineage as possible. But their thing was very raw and real, as was my thing with my friends. So it was a beautiful transition of trying to do that and help them with that. But it was family. Sorry, I'm stuttering over my words now. But
Oh, I'm loving this, dude. You're killing it. Keep it up.
um,
Yeah.
but yeah, that was a very shortened story of kind of the preface of the all the time getting to this point.
I tell you, man, like you have such, and I'm going to tie this into the questions. There's going to be a long ramp up to a question.
Oh,
Okay.
go for
I can be long winded too. It isn't my nature to talk, so that's why I love to sit back and listen to other people. Because my whole life here is blah blah blah, kind of music. So I'm just like, dude, talk to me, brother. Talk, teach me, tell me a story.
You and I are on the same tip. I love it. Go
Absolutely.
on.
So you keep connecting something that I think is one of the coolest parts of music, and that's the bond you create with people. When you're making music with someone, you are having a conversation
Mm,
without saying a word. Your instruments are creating something that never existed until they connect together, and then
mm.
the waves get into someone else's ear, and something magical you're creating. It's dealing with children. I can't say making love, but it's something intimate, something very profound is happening, and to hear that come from someone else about bandmates and things like that, it's all of us, man. We all feel that. And then
Yeah,
being
it's a marriage for sure, or a relation, like a very intimate. It's the same thing. Communication. It's all of it. All of those key points. Go on. Sorry.
and no, 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 definitely, you're right. And then watching, you know, showing up to that gig in Chicago and seeing one of my favorite bands growing up and watching and figuring out in real time, oh my God, this is the son of the Jason. Oh my God. And watching you and Butch do the tune together where you were singing and then he embraced you at the end. And I was like, oh my, this like my dad's a drummer. So I get the family, the real family and the chosen family element. So just
Yeah.
watching that from a fan was just incredibly beautiful. And to hear you recap it definitely connects completely around. Really cool.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I hear stories of like, have you ever read like Mo Meta Blues by Questlove?
Nope, but it's getting written down right now.
It's a great book. It's a great book, especially if you're a fan of like 90s hip hop. But
Same.
it, you
Bust a
know,
zipper every day.
yeah, yeah, same. And it's a interesting thing because with his backstory, same, like his parents were in a family band, and it was kind of like as soon as he was 3 years old, he got behind the kit, and his pops was like, all right, he's talented, he's good, and he made him work. And it was one of those things for me. I think it was my parents. It came from yeah, again, being, I guess, an independent artist in the 90s, and that back of the van life, that whole thing, it comes from a real rawness and a real love and a real intimacy that's curated and self-curated. And it wasn't the time of the internet, so a lot of that was ignorance and sheer muscling through finding yourself. And I have a big reverence for that and respect for that, and they did too. And so I think it was a big reason why for my childhood, until they kind of knew that my journey was kind of happening, they just really did not want to ever kind of even have an inflection. But it was one of those things that when asked to do the shows, it's just that natural intimacy of family, and what they had especially is just, I think it's very pronounced, and it's its own thing, and you can feel it. And so whatever I could be to just enhance that, and again, just be present, because they are my family. I love them with all my heart. But yeah.
What was that experience like, sort of shifting the levers? So you went from this 10-year period of working on your own music with your own guys, and then you're off in Europe and just sideman stuff, whatever. And now you have to learn, 18 songs or whatever that you probably heard growing up. I don't know if you have a ton of recollection of watching it the first time around as a younger guy, if you were alive then, I don't even know. So like, what was that experience of, oh my gosh, there's a weight to doing this with my family?
I think again, the way it really only kind of came from just, I I really only do music to make music, and I'm not and I kind of talked about this about you to you before this, and kind of mentioned it a little bit with when I started out as a bass player, but I was a nerd when I got into it, and I loved the culture of all of this. But then at the same time, I was very quickly as a kid saw the grossness of the culture and how it kind of just muddles up like the good things. I saw yeah, just whether it just different scenes and communities having all these bylines and rules to just like stomp people. It feels like stomp people's self-expression by the end of the day. It didn't really make a lot of sense. Or if you want to learn guitar, these are the riffs, these are the scales. Again, it just seems like a lot of coloring before anybody's able to kind of make their own space. And so for me, it's always been about songs and making songs and music. And that is Butch's most important thing as well, and all of their favorite things. And the three of them worked very tirelessly to create something that was their own vibration together. And so I guess the pressure came from making sure that that was respected, because there is a lot of pride in musicianship and creativity, and you want to be your own self and you want to be this own thing. And there's a time and place, but there's a middle ground where you can be self-expressive, but you're still knowing what somebody else is laying out and creating for you. And so that was like, I guess not the pressure, but I guess it was a pressure, but it was kind of the fun of it. And during those 10 years as a band, we also all got jobs as contract musicians when we were in high school. Wow. So by the time that we were 15, we had been playing the bar club circuits like long enough that we got to the point that people were like, can you play to a click track? And could you play 3 or 4 chords for this pop song for somebody? And it was like, yeah. So we would do like live event mostly, and then some like studio stuff in high school. And so it kind of helps when the band ended earlier this year, it helped the brain training come back into helping other artists. And that's always been a huge interest anyway. I think more so than like guitar players, people like John Coltrane and all those people really interested me when I was younger, because I love the idea of them being able to hold their own in their creations and not feel a sense of insecurity of being able to hop on somebody else's record and make something really great. But yeah.
It's interesting you say the click track part. That's something that I also try and instill in a lot of young musicians, because
it's awesome. It's a great trick.
Dude, when I was a kid, I was terrified of it. The teacher would put on the metronome, I'd shit in my pants. And now it's like, no, kids, we're going to get you comfortable locking in, because that's especially now with everyone playing to tracks and having, playback engineers on gigs and stuff, like it is another band member that you need to be able to lock into. Otherwise you're in trouble.
Yes. It makes grown adults shake. It's I think the click track thing was why I referenced Paramore earlier. That was the first time I ever heard succinct rhythm with guitar. Again, I was 8 or 9. So like metalcore came 3 years later, 4 years later, where it was like all the chuggy chugs that I could ever want in my life. But before that, it was like, wow, like these quantized guitars that are like moving with the snare and kick pattern. Obviously, I did not have any of that vernacular at the time, but like I felt that. And so it got me interested in it. And it, I got that tip. It was just like, well, why don't you sit down with a click? Why don't you sit down with a click track? Because your drummer's doing it. By the time I was like in middle school, my drummer had started trying to do with a click track. And so he was like, well, what if we all did it? And so every member just would sit with their right hand. That's like my big thing because I also have taught and teach as well. And I love it. And absolutely adore it. And it's a big thing that I always love giving guitar players shit for, is like most of their right hands are just horrific. They like all of their intention and emotion is right here. But if you really want to make anybody feel anything, it always comes right from the right hand or the left hand if you're lefty. But yeah. And so I think getting over that was really good. And then there came a time where I kind of had to break out of it personally, and like learn how to operate in flux again. And go ahead and
be human again.
Yeah. Because you spend, you spend all this time getting as tight as possible and thinking in the box. But again, to reference Questlove, it's like thinking of time, thinking of you as the time. You're not, or sorry, you're married to the time. You're not the time. So you can kind of roll with it. And I'm botching his quote, but his whole point was that drummers are told you are the metronome, you are the backbone. And I think, yes, that's cool for like the tight stuff, but the human factor of like records like Voodoo by D'Angelo, the reason why those feel so good is like it's an insane brain of time that's happening, but there's no anxiety to be yourself and dance around it and find an energy a little bit behind or a little bit ahead. And it's why like people like I think Unknown Mortal Orchestra caused such a stir within people, because he, as a guitar player, Ruben, I think plays within that same tip. And I also needed that as a kid. So there was a process of learning all the tricks and then another 5 years of breaking every single one of them and trying to figure out what the good middle ground was for myself personally.
Victor Wooten, I think it's in his book, The Music Lesson. He talks a little bit about like where, if you're a little bit before the beat or you're a little bit behind the beat, it's all right. And he also talks about there's no bad notes, which I incorporate into every guitar lesson.
Yeah.
I think if you,
Yeah, his little middle trick of the
yeah,
on the other
yeah,
side.
it,
Yeah.
it's growing up, no one taught me any of that stuff. So I was so afraid to step outside of the box or to even play leads for the first couple of years of being a guitar player because I was so afraid of hitting a bad note. And now I take great pleasure in teaching someone who's first
Oh,
6 months into playing the instrument. I'm like, okay, just play anything. We're going to make this work. Let me show you how and open your mind up. And it's fun.
yeah. No, it's I completely agree. As a teacher too, like sometimes when a kid, if it's like a first lesson with a student, will be like, if it's piano or guitar or bass or drums, it's just like, go ahead and make noise that's just bad on it. Let's get comfortable with that sort of thing. Because guess what? There's gonna be a lot of it. So as long as like you don't feel the need to tighten your neck up, I'll never berate you for that. And it's in those mistakes that you end up finding yourself, or you find the riff that is your thing, or that at least that's been my case. And I've heard the same, like I think it is in those moments of you trying to get something right and not quite getting it right, and you just submit to it, that a lot of things kind of open up. But there's a lot of anxiety before that, especially when learning music, especially from an instructor, because I was self-taught. But so it's funny teaching kids. So it's because I kind of have to come from some certain angles that are a little bit different, but they go into like a school mode sometimes of like demerits. And
Yep.
it's like, no. You're okay. It's all right to be yourself and be imperfect and mess up. That's just how this goes. And you're playing. But yeah.
In New York, I don't know if they have this in other states, but they have something called NISMA, which is like New York State Musical something with an A. I don't know.
Mm.
It's a competition. And a
Okay.
lot of parents will, when it's NISMA season, send their students in with whatever their piece is. And there's this like $300 binder that you have to buy every 2 years that has the songs to choose from. And
Well,
there's different levels and it's graded. And I despise that. I don't think music is a
yeah.
competition. I don't think that's the way it should be. And the kids don't really care. I've never seen one pro musician be like, I had a really good NISMA score and now I'm famous. Like there's no connect between that. But the parents, it's the same thing as the kid being on the dean's list or a straight A student or, being the star quarterback. It's something that make the parents feel good. But I
Yeah.
hate like
Yeah, you can, and it's so funny because you can't blame somebody who's just not involved in the culture at all to like pick that up, because to them it is the same thing. It is, for most people, it is extracurricular activities, and it is something to put on an application. And there is a tension there I felt from teacher to teacher of being like, oh man, like okay, but
we
it,
sell,
go ahead, go ahead.
that we sell t-shirts here that say music is not a seasonal activity. Because I
I
hate
love it.
they quit for summer. I'm like, why? Why are you doing that?
Yeah, no, it is super interesting. Yeah, even like there's that thing too of just like, and I experienced this too when I first started playing. It's just like, okay, well, it's this, or this, and then you play it right once, and then you stop, and it's like, no. It's you got to keep going. It's not like a grade. It's not like a test. It's not like, oh, you 100%ed it. It's done. It's like breathing. It's just a part. It's an extension of yourself.
Absolutely.
But it is weird though, because for me, again, I come from a place that is from more about creating music and creating songs. And I too, just even in my work as a contract musician or even on the road with just like fellow people in bands, like I've had to be okay with just people who just say, man, I just want to figure out all the mathematics of this fretboard and learn it technically perfectly. And that's such a valid way. That's so valid and it's totally okay. It's ass backwards to my approach and that, but it's not my approach. And that's been a weird thing that over the past few years I've been contemplating, is just like deleting sort of any cynicism, just because I find it distracting, honestly, to anything that really counts or matters. And that's kind of put this snowball into, okay, so there is no right or wrong way on this path, like you were prefacing. And if somebody wants to get really good for the campfire to impress so and like to impress so and so they find attractive, or you know, if there's somebody just wants to be in a punk band with their friends because it feels like a good pastime to do, not even trying to be the Beatles or anything, all of that is awesome and perfect and valid.
Dude, I talk about it in my book and I talk about it in lessons, and it like pisses off some of the other people that I employ because it's so not what you're supposed to tell people. Well, when I was 13 and started playing guitar again, it was because one, I wanted to be Metallica, and
Mm-hmm.
two, I wanted girls to pay attention to me. I was so shy and insecure, and I just wanted something that I thought would make me cool. And it has
Yeah.
opened so many doors, and I'm so far from that now. But
Yeah.
that was the spark that lit the fire, and Metallica. So it's like whatever gets you going, it's very individualized. I believe in that
Yes. And
wholeheartedly.
it's also very important to be okay with the fact that you can change your feelings about it from the beginning to where you are now. Like you said, it's just like it might have been about the girls and the friends. And then I've met a few people who beautifully have found their voice, and then it becomes very much their daily entry, like a journal, and it becomes something very precious. And then there, you know, there's a billion other things of that self-evolution. I had some really good advice from a bunch of people. I always wanted to just be around people who were better than me. And a couple of things happened. The first time that I was in a band, I got boldly told that I was the worst of the two guitar players, which was great because it made me sit at home and work and work and work and work and work and work until that I felt we were able to have a conversation with each other that did not take that didn't feel like it was pulling people down, right? And it was good for me to know, and I like that honesty. Not everyone should have, I think, that sort of honesty, but it worked for me. And somebody also was like, no matter what you do and how good you are, no one will agree that you're the best. So you better just get comfortable being yourself in this. And that was huge. Those two things happened right at the very beginning. And it changed everything, because no longer was I trying to play like people. No longer did I hear a solo from somebody or thought and feel like I needed to do it. In fact, it took all the weight off of being like, oh, actually, I don't really want to play classic rock riffs. I don't really want to do this sort of things. I was learning them because I felt like I needed to. And I love all of those music, I love all that music, and I really genuinely love it, but it wasn't the pool. And so I feel like when kids can just be comfortable with just, hey man, it's just whatever you want out of this, or whatever this is to you. And I say kids as like a just as a proverbial everybody. It's
I
just
know I
all of
call
it's
every
valid
kid
and
into the
okay.
same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's my vocabulary.
Um, which I should stop because that could be undermining. But yeah. So I love that, and I love that you like are open and honest with that, and open and honest about the evolution of it. Again, just like I can't commend you enough about what this platform is to people, because I think it is a really good voice of just the honesty and diversity of what this path is for every single person.
Absolutely, man. And thank you for the positivity. You know, something interesting happened the other day, which is going to tie into what you just said. So when I first started playing guitar, it was me and my buddy James. He's a couple years older than me. And when we first started playing guitar, he learned all the Korn albums front to back, all the Pink Floyd albums front to back, all the Chili Peppers front to back. And I started writing music immediately. So
Yeah,
fast forward to literally last night, I'm teaching his niece, who's 11, how to play guitar because he's,
full circle, cool.
and she says to me, Rob, who's better, you or James? Who's better at guitar? And then like his sister was there and she's like, oh no, like it's the rivalry. I'm like, well, I'll tell you what, James is better at sounding like Metallica than I am. And he's better at sounding like David Gilmour than I am. But
Yes,
I'm better at sounding like me than he is. And she's,
yes,
what? And I'm like, yeah, that's the best I could have said that. And it felt great.
That's really good. That's really good. That's also like just the most subtle flex ever to that kid.
I don't think it's what you wanted to hear, but I was like, that's
Yeah,
great.
yeah, that's so funny. Yeah, I know. For me, it's like so I did do the thing really early on where I would learn records top to bottom because I saw the improvement in things like right hand and dexterity and the idea of like, oh, I really like these things. So I would take album, and I was an albums kid. Probably until like last year, I just have reached this point now where my friends have just been making great playlists of, so it's like weirdly taking me out of albums, but I grew up as an albums listener. And so I would sit down and try to learn them top to bottom. And it was fun for a minute, but then I kind of started figuring out that I was like, some songs I love entirely. Some songs, it's the bridge that makes me want to cry. And I think the verses are kind of mid. And so I would be like, I don't want to learn the verses because I don't think they're very good. I just like, why is this bridge make me feel that way? So I would learn going into the bridge, and then going out of it. And I would do that with like certain parts and of just being like, okay, yo, that like, okay, what is that weird chord? And it kind of expanded and moved out. So I love that because I think that is a very cool tactic. And yeah, I was kind of somewhere in the middle personally, for a minute until it kind of just ended up going straight to writing for
Yeah, for
from
me,
there.
it was weird. Like I was so drawn to trying to create stuff and come up with songs, and
Yeah,
that's how I kind of found my own flavor. And then fast forward years later, when I stopped doing the touring and stuff and went into the wedding bands and the cover stuff and corporate stuff, all of a sudden now I'm having to learn Lady Gaga tunes and Ed Sheeran
yeah,
and Motown and disco,
yeah,
and it was like now I'm approaching all those genres with my own flavor. So it's this weird.
yeah.
It's like funk guitar, Rob Baby mixed together, jazz guitar, Rob Baby mixed together. And I studied some jazz guitar in college, so like that was kicking around in my brain. But yeah, it's just weird how we become these chameleons, I think. And it's your voice exists as the overarching connector, but we're
Mm.
always pulling from a little bit of everything. There's only so many notes, there's only so many licks, there's only so many chord progressions. But
Yeah.
I heard this quote somewhere. I don't remember who said it. I'm not going to pretend to remember, but it's like the vibrato is sort of the fingerprint of a guitar player, and everyone wiggles that note just a little bit different.
I've heard that. It's funny. And I also heard the quip that young cats typically try to do there's some poor tasting euphemisms in the full joke of this, but like a young man's vibrato typically ends up being pretty quick.
Yeah, yeah. There you
And it's with and then you get BB King, and he's sitting there, and he'll just work that for forever. But yeah, no, I very much agree, and I think for me too, it's like whatever is self-serving the energy or the vibe. A lot of the times, finding yourself in it. It's just being confident in a conversation or having an opinion is how I feel about it. It's just like you want to have a conversation with somebody who has a brain behind them. If they're just like reflecting everything that has ever been said to them, it's hard to make something of sustenance or substance. So it's easier to come into that being like, oh yeah, this is the topic of conversation, pop music or whatever, and this is my opinion and my inflection on
go.
that concept. Funny enough about those bins too. I think Jay Mascis had a funny thing about that when he was like, I don't trust anybody who can't do the trill bend what not trill do
Right.
that. I don't know what it's called. Again, I'm self-taught, so all these technical terms for it I'm kind of a miss, but
Call it the Ace Frehley one, but that do that kind of thing. Yeah.
yeah, he was like, I don't trust anybody who can't bend convincingly. If it's too pretty or too like tactile, he's just like, I don't trust that. And I thought that was so funny.
Because it's
And it
coming
kind
from your
of
soul, man. John Petrucci had this quote. It's like the greater the vocabulary, the greater the expression. So it's the more you got kicking in there.
yeah,
All right,
100%.
brother. I'm gonna jump to the rapid fire section because
Let's
I feel
go.
like we're on a flow, and now I'm gonna make it awkward.
Okay.
All right. So in the next series of questions, I'm going to ask you a this or that. Most of them
Okay.
are instrument related. We do get into effects, and then the most awkward part comes the band part at the end. The correct
Mhm.
answer to all questions is usually both, but that's no fun. So you can
I
say,
won't hit you with that. I won't hit you with that. Okay, cool.
okay, humbucker or single coil pickup.
Single coil.
Cool. I agree. More expression.
Yeah.
Uh, so then Les Paul or Strat, I guess would be Strat.
No, Les Paul.
Interesting. All right, dude. All right.
The reason behind it is we could go into the guitar, but also the fact that Les is the one that created it as a guitar player, his inventions in those prototypes, it's everything about why I do things. So Les
All right.
Paul, for
There's a
sure.
really good book, The Birth of Loud. It's about
Yeah, I've heard of it. I haven't read it though.
it's sick. Like I listened to the audio version, I banged it out in a day. It's worth checking out because it's
Ooh,
all that stuff.
love
Okay,
it.
if you were to grab a Fender guitar, would it be a Strat, a Tele, or I guess a Jaguar or a Jazzmaster? Because I've seen you use one of those.
Yeah, my main guitar is a Jaguar. I have all of them over here. My main guitar is a Jag, and which was kind of shocking. I've always loved the body types, but the functionality. I didn't want to pay like spend another few $100s on just upgrades to make it functioning because I hit guitars really hard and I bend them and all that stuff. So a Tele, probably off rip, but the new Jazz Masters and Jaguars that they're doing are just so good now. And I'm an Elvis Costello television, like all of that stuff
Yeah.
is, I
The
love it.
offset
So,
body just looks cool. There's just something about
yeah.
it that makes you go,
Loveless. I'm a cliche. Loveless was one of my favorite records when I was in high school. Okay.
"Ah, that's okay.
I know. I will. That's not. I'm not sorry about that one bit.
All right, so then some of these will be less relevant. Blah, blah, blah. For your guitar picks, a thin pick, a medium, or a thick pick?
Never really been preferential. I'll grab whatever. But recently I bought those Herco ones because the Herco 70.75 ones because my buddy who's really heady, Alex, and then Butch both bought them. They're like, dude, they're awesome. But I had thick picks from playing bass for a long time, and I just going back, and then my first session ever. The producer took the pick out of my hand and handed me a thin pick because he's like, "You hit the shit out of that, and you're knocking everything out of tune." So I'll use whatever, and I've gotten better, but since then it's gotten me to the point of flexibility that if you hand me kind of whatever, I'll roll with it.
It's interesting you say about going out of tune. I did an interview with Jake Bowen from the band Periphery. We went to high school together, actually, and
Yeah.
they're a three guitar band. And I assumed, being a gent metal kind of band, they would use very thick picks, but they used thin picks because with the three guitars, the thicker pick was making the guitar slightly out of tune, and they weren't locking in together.
Yeah, and they
Never
also the
thought of that.
jazz picks that a lot of those
Yeah,
shredder dudes. I had a buddy try to get me on one of those, and it was like I'll just hit it with my hand, and I'm like, this is basically the same thing for
yeah,
me.
yep, totally.
Which is just that's my fault on technicality,
No, I
not
know
the
exactly what you're saying, though. All right, so if you're playing bass, would you grab a P bass or a jazz bass?
P bass.
Cool.
It's what people are going to want. It's what people are going to want if you're doing a session thing most of the time. But yeah.
It's the thing. You're totally right.
Mhm.
If you're grabbing an acoustic, would you prefer a Martin or a Taylor?
Martin.
Okay. On your electric guitar, would you prefer a Rosewood or a maple fretboard?
Rosewood. But I've become a fan of some maple guitars the past few years. I had a Tele Deluxe when I was in Ireland, none of my gear showed up.
Okay.
And so this sweet, sweet, sweet person, just local, like the front of house guy, called a buddy who drove in with his 72 Deluxe Tele. And I was like, he's so sweet. He's like, great show, man. Have a great show. See ya. Can't make it, but have a good one. And then just
Wow.
dipped. And it was great. So thank you to whoever that was again. That was really sweet. But yeah, I don't quite have a hardcore preference, but Rosewood typically.
Yeah, so for some people it's aesthetic. Other people, they hear the difference, feel the difference. It's aesthetic for me. You really got to be trying really hard to
It's
really.
a feel thing for me, but I don't mind the feel of it too much.
For your guitar amplifier, do you prefer the gain to come out of the amp or to use a pedal for the gain?
I've always been a hands person. So the breakup just comes from kind of hitting it a little bit harder. But I still, again, I've been using more effects than I ever really have the past few years for fun, just for expression. So I have a Timmy and I have a, a, a dirt transmitter fuzz that I both will use together and separately for just boosts and
For
get
the
high gain.
Marvelous 3 shows, was it live amps on stage or was it modelers?
So mine was live amps, and then Butch had a combination of a two rock combo, a PRS head, and then they start with an F.
Oh,
They're
frac.
great. Fractal. Yeah. And his rig was like dude, it was so sick. It would make everybody just, it was awesome.
It
It
does
was
sound
dialed in so perfect. Again, I'm still and Butch comes from the same, you know, world as I do of turning to the amp and the knocking it over and the
yeah.
squeals. But his is just, I think, for what he needed to do at that, just like as dialed in and as possible. My job was trying to help like out with like record accurate stuff that had never really been done before, and to help alleviate like just like focus on just playing guitar how you want to play a guitar, that kind of a thing. So it made sense. But for me, I used a Three Monkeys sock monkey combo. That has been my main amp since I was about 18.
What's the wattage on that?
I believe it's 18.
Oh, nice.
But or 12. I'm not quite sure, but it has a, it's kind of like a mix between like a Fender Tweed and an 18-watt Marshall
Nice.
vibe. And it has that pull lever of just like craziness
Nice.
that I never get to use, but I love it. It is cool. It's got a really cool headroom and a chime to it. I like things kind of like a piano. I want to hear every note, even if it's high gain. I want to be able to hear everything, or textures of hands and all of that. So it does that really well. But the flip side of that is you don't really have a lot to hide behind. So you botch it. Everyone knows you're botching.
I like that you use the piano reference for the headroom, sort of just all the notes, because I'll use a lot of digital stuff now when I go out, just because it's easier and I can control the sound and every room's different, blah, blah, blah. But there's a bunch of amps over here. You can't really see. And I love
No, your setup is absolutely miraculous. I told
that's
you
just
before.
my cool background for my videos.
You like touch it and it disappears. That's hilarious.
No. It's there, but I mean, like it looks cool as the back.
Oh yeah.
But for all those amps, that's the idea. Like I like to have the ability to hear every note, no matter how dirty it is. We're gonna go to effects now.
Okay.
Delay,
Let's do it.
reverb.
Reverb.
Okay,
But that's changing slightly
it's okay.
over time.
I was a delay guy forever, and I got a Fender Twin, and I was like, "Ooh, this reverb's nice." And then I like put a drive pedal in front of it. I'm like, "Ooh, reverb with distortion. I didn't know that could be a thing." And now I feel completely naked if there's not just reverb on every rig, every pedal board, every amp, because I just want a little bit of cushion to catch me when I fall, because I'm gonna fall.
Oh yeah. I also I've had a like I've played around with like a bunch of different reverb sounds and reverb settings and plugins and all that stuff. But honestly, the Boss RV5's modulation and gate verb. I remember in middle school or maybe early high school, Champagne Coast by Blood Orange came out. And Dev Hynes, incredible multi-instrumentalist and composer, his like main sound on the guitars on that were like it sounded like the RV5 gate setting just permanently on. And I was like, that's so sick. But yeah, and since then it's just kind of become this addictive thing that I use to stomp on and off and use to kind of color things, kind of like an Ableton session or something, live a little bit for the switches. So that's why reverb, because there's something about the you suck of the way that I just is the turn off.
I hear that 100%. What about modulation? Would you prefer a phaser or a chorus? And this is a taboo question because neither of which are super popular right now. I guess maybe choruses, but answer and then I'll answer.
Yeah, it's funny. I feel like the 2010s both got really hot because of Tame Impala and 1975 Worlds of all. Like, yeah, that totally makes sense. And all of those people are great. And that's why I like both of them, to be honest. Flangers, I'm joking, as the middle question. Probably chorus. To be honest, I think the diversity of dialing that in, you can make it kind of have different, you can do the Cure and the Smiths thing, or you can kind of make it a little bit more of this weird accentuated almost double. But yeah, chorus.
Yeah, I'll tell you, of that question, no one ever says phaser, and I always answer it the same way. And I have like literally yesterday, I was getting this colored in, and he was playing Dark Side of the Moon while I
Yeah,
was chiseling at my arm.
that's so, yeah, wow, yesterday, that's so fresh. You didn't show me
Shiny,
that just now. Yeah, it looks great. The color looks great.
all slimy, so I'm trying to like not rub it on anything because it has ointment on it. Super cool. But he was playing Dark Side while it was happening, and I was listening to there's a lot of phaser on that record, and it's
Yeah.
perfect for that. But or Univibe, like either one of those, but it does its thing, you know.
Yeah, yeah. it's definitely immediately, just because it's the context in which most people know it. It's psychedelia, which is great.
Do you
I
think
use phaser in my own music a
Van
lot.
Halen 1, phaser super low? It's on the entire time almost. It's just a
Yeah,
little bit of push.
cool.
Okay, we're going to go into bands now. This is where it's going to get funky. There's only a couple. Don't worry, you'll be free of me soon. The Beatles or the Stones?
Beatles, but that hurt.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know. I know. The answer is both. It's okay. But now, if we're going to make it harder, is it John or is it Paul?
What's crazy is George is my favorite Beatle.
That's the
So,
easiest question. That's why I make it hard.
yeah.
I'm going to say George.
So as a kid, it was always John. I related more to John's writing and his stuff, but I was watching during break Get Back again, because it just, since it came out that time of year, it just now feels like it's a
It's a
tradition.
Christmas movie for me too. I get it.
Right? Isn't that funny? But yeah, and you're validating every person in that room. I feel like, or at least I am, of just be like, I get it. I totally get exactly why you're acting this way. And I think Paul is just so great that that's why it's an easy diss. It's like trying to like diss on someone like Brad Pitt, or so, like some, like, it's just like, it's easy because it's just so conventionally beautiful and great. And I understand if you have an aversion to such a thing, why you wouldn't like it. But um Paul, as I get older, especially his stuff in Wings and in the 70s, just the sounds and the rhythms and the bass lines are just like eating me up right now. But John,
Okay, that's fine. That's all good. And that was a very educated answer. So thank you for running with that one.
of course,
Bowie or Dylan?
Bowie. But I'm reading Chronicles right now. Bowie. Bowie.
That's a polarizing one because like Dylan's love him or hate him, but he's still Bob Dylan. And David Bowie, there's so many errors of him. It's hard to like pick the one. Like for me,
Yeah.
he came into my radar in the weirdest way just because of my age. It was the record he did, Earthling, I think it was, with Trent Reznor, and it had him Afraid of Americans and those tunes. And I was like, with him
That
with
music video.
the jacket, with the Union Jack on. Oh my God, just in the red short hair, pure rock star.
Dude. Oh, yeah, he was crushing it. Dude, the red hair of the 90s, Lush, Bowie, Scott Weiland. It was a vibe and it looked so good.
Yeah.
There's a guitar player, the band Fontaines, DC. They're bringing that back right now, and I respect that shit ton. But
Right.
yeah, I think Bowie. So Bowie's like big hero is a person that I'm also really interested in, named Yukio Mishima, and it was the idea of that chameleon and manifestation of the eras of your identity and self, which is something that has personally been a big thing for my life. And so knowing that Bowie also used that as a thing, I like it and I relate to it. And I also really relate to his whole, he was, somebody was trying to like ask him a question, I think once in an interview, and they were just trying to make him answer in a way that was just kind of cookie cutter of what every person should say, of just like, no, music is my life and these fans and everything. And he was just like, dude, no, honestly, it's the medium I chose to get things out of my head. And it's the same thing for me. So it's not this anything really other than that. It's the chosen format and voice of that sort of thing. So Bowie, but
Cool. It's all good.
great right now.
Yeah. No, I mean, every one of these, the answer is both. I got three more for you. I got Zeppelin or Floyd.
Zeppelin was my first favorite band. Zeppelin, John Paul Jones.
Yes, legend. All my friends, when they did that second Page and Plant record that had Most High on it, they toured here at the local Giant Stadium, football stadium. And my best friend from the band, that guy James, he went, and my other closest friend Brian, they went, and no one thought to invite me. And in hindsight, I'm like, wasn't Zeppelin. John Paul Jones was. Good for you.
That's how you make up for it. Like, it wasn't that. So
All right. Little more recent one, and then my favorite of the bunch. But let's start here. Pearl Jam or Nirvana?
oh wow. Nirvana.
Okay.
But Pearl Jam's so good. I really like Eddie a lot, and Ten is so good. Pops has a funny story. There's this place called The Point in the 90s in Atlanta. and it now it's called Clothing Warehouse. It's a great clothing, like, great thrift place if you're in Little Five Points. But Pops was like grabbing a slice from Little Five Pizza and having a beer, and our buddy who was working the door was like, "Hey man, no one's in here. Can you come and sit in? I'll give you some beer." He's like, "Yeah." And sure enough, it was like a weird early promo run of like Pearl Jam, and he was like, "Yo, who are these guys?" So I love Pearl Jam, but Nirvana, I think Kurt's songwriting is what gives me that answer. So,
And there are different things. That is not a fair question because
they're very different.
small sample size. Pearl Jam is still out there,
Yeah,
crushing it. I've seen them probably 25, 30 times, but
yeah,
I found Nirvana way later. Like I remember when Kurt died, it was shattering. I was in elementary school and I still knew something was happening in the world.
yeah,
And then during the pandemic, I found Nirvana. I'm like, oh wow, these guys are fucking awesome. So
yeah, yeah, yeah.
a little
No,
late.
they were the only band of that. I was not really into a lot of. I love, like, the '90s are half my favorite era of rock and half my least favorite era of rock, and kind of working together to make it happen. And so as there was like a lot of the people in that scene that kind of came in the wake of it that it didn't really resonate, but they were one of the few that Molly's Lips, I heard Molly's Lips, and obviously besides like Teen Spirit, I'm not going to try to pretend that was the first song I ever heard by Nirvana, but I think it was like Molly's Lips, which was a cover, and all that stuff in middle school that I was like, I like his vibe. I like it. I like that, and I liked how much he pulled people with him, of like Daniel Johnston, and here's the Melvins, everybody, and the Breeders are just as good as the Pixies and all that stuff. I commend Kurt using his voice to give a lot of really beautiful artists, I think, a platform that we all now love. So Nirvana, but Eddie's done the same thing. So
Cool. All good.
yeah.
All right, man. My last one, it's a polarizing one, and I'm a rock guitar player, so I gotta ask, is it Sammy Hagar or David Lee Roth?
Okay. So I just don't. I'm not gonna be. I can't. I can't answer this without just prefacing that I'm not well enough educated in Hagar era Van Halen. But what I do know is that every Van Halen mega fan that I know, aka Butch Walker and Jace Fincher and Slug Mitchell, who were at the shows, they really despise they don't despise, they were never a pro Hagar hater. They always thought Hagar era was incredible, and every big mega fan of Van Halen I know, I feel like, has that take. But I feel like I can't give you that answer. So, but maybe Hagar, because everyone, I feel like I feel like
Establishment, dude.
he
I
gets
think
shit on. So, and he's a great guitar player, and great singer. By some of those fans, I don't think so anymore. But I think back in the day, it was a point of contention.
yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, when it first happened, I wasn't cognizant of it because I was too young. But as I came into it, like my first Van Halen show was with Gary Sharon because that was like 1998, and I was like, this is the only thing I could see. And then I saw the Hagar reunion, and I've seen Sammy solo. They're all awesome. But yeah,
Yeah. Well, David Lee Roth's got the tritone, and he could put his legs,
dude, I
fun.
did that split at the Stone Pony in New Jersey, Asbury Park. I jumped off the drum riser. I did the air split, holding my guitar, nailed it, kept singing, got to the microphone, started to feel a breeze in my pants. And then I realized about 5 songs later, I had popped the seam in the crotch of my pants because I was wearing girls' jeans because that was the cool thing to do.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
2002, because they didn't have the stretchy in the pants that they have now.
No,
And,
yeah. You bought in the girls section the
absolutely,
paint.
H&M, yeah. So I popped the seam, lime green underwear, thank God. And my book cover, I have a sticker of it, but it's this green color on the book because that was the color of my underwear, and that's a story I tell in the book. So that's my David Lee Roth moment.
An episode on worse on stage moments
Yeah,
with
that'd be
people.
epic.
Oh, it'd be so good. I have so many, and my friends, the amount of almost or absolutely going to the bathroom on yourself or something like those kind of things. It's crazy how often that hits us all if you've been doing it long enough.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
100%, dude. I've fallen down. I was like,
Dude, I fell at the Chicago show. Did you see that?
no.
Oh yeah, I
I
laughed
had a
so
few
hard.
beers.
Oh no, yeah, I mean, me too. But it was one of those things that was just I was going to, but I didn't mean to as early as I did. I was about to just fall off, but I just caught and I was like, man, that hasn't happened in years, and it felt kind of good. The
Nice.
sting felt good. I was like, yep, 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 yep. Anyway,
Awesome, dude. Well, listen, this has been incredible. Thank you so much for your time. I'm so excited to
yeah,
have
thank you,
gotten to
man.
do this and so grateful for I've gotten just bumping into you that day because that was just very serendipitous. Like we were supposed to get to the Chicago Music Exchange an hour earlier than we did, and then we got lost. There were so many things that had to line up for that to happen. So thank you
Yeah,
so much for your time, man.
no, thank you, and again, thank you for all you're doing. Let's keep in touch, and yeah, stoked to
Said.
talk again soon.
Yeah, no, we part two is in the books. Absolutely.
I love it. Awesome. Have a great day.
All right, brother. Be good. Thank you.